Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Adventure and Mystery Book Club. I'm Bill Mallory, branch manager of the La Jolla Library, and I'm so glad that you could join me today for today's reading of King Solomon's Mines by H. Rider Haggard. This time we are on chapter 17, so we'll be reading that. Just a quick recap. By the way, we are going to be pre-recorded throughout this week. Just a heads up. Also, in our recap of what has gone on before, our three heroes have properly placed the correct king in charge of Kukuanaland, the benevolent and kind king, and they have deposed, or at least they have helped the natives who want to depose of the cruel king. They have assisted them and have overthrown the cruel and evil regime, and have now want to accept their reward, which was diamonds from the fabled King Solomon's diamond mines. And so the only person who knows where these diamonds are located is the ancient and evil witch woman Gagul, who has taken them to a strange place where there are three mountainous towers. They don't look real, but they are. And as she leads them to this place, and they walk up, and it seems like they are placed in a triangular shape. So there's if you were to make an isosceles triangle and draw a line between each one of them, that's the shape you would have. And so there's something unnatural about them. However, there is a door carved into one of them, the main one, the farthest one away, and they have gone into it, and they have found that it is it's a room. It's a vast cathedral-like room filled with stalactites and stalagmites, and it is basically, they find out, a burial chamber for the former kings of Kukuanaland, and there they see the body of Twala, the recently deposed king, who was beheaded in single combat by one of our heroes, Sir Henry Curtis, and so there he sits. And what happens is that they seat him on a chair as if he were just sitting down, and let the water drip on him from above, and thus he gets covered in this kind of limestone minerals, and his body is preserved that way. And all the kings are like that. You can see all the kings are sort of around this table with this giant sculpture featuring death, anatomically correct. They point out in the book that all the bones were correct, and this giant figure of the Grim Reaper sits or stands above this table, and then around this massive table are all of the former kings of Kukuanaland. It's imagery-wise, it's sort of a wonderful visual to kind of see this, and they realize that this is where the kings are buried. And then they go further down, and Gagul leads them past that and into another chamber. And so, with that in mind, we will see what Ellen Quatermain and his compatriots, Captain Good and Sir Henry Curtis, and the native girl Fulata, who has taken a liking to Captain Good, and see what happens in chapter 17, which is entitled Solomon's Treasure Chamber. While we were engaged in recovering from our fright and in examining the grisly wonders of the place of death, Gagul had been differently occupied. Somehow or other, for she was marvelously active when she chose, she had scrambled on to the great table and made her way to where our departed friend Twala was placed under the drip, to see, suggested Good, how he was pickling, or for some dark purpose of her own. Then, after bending down to kiss his icy lips, as though in affectionate greeting, she hobbled back, stopping now and again to address a remark, the tenor of which I could not catch, to one or other of the shrouded forms, just as you or I might welcome an old acquaintance. Having gone through this mysterious and horrible ceremony, she squatted herself down on the table immediately under the white death, and began, so far as I could make out, to offer up prayers. The spectacle of this wicked creature pouring out supplications, evil ones no doubt, to the arch-enemy of mankind was so uncanny that it caused us to hasten our inspection. "Now, Gagool," said I in a low voice, somehow one did not dare speak above a whisper in that place, "lead us to the chamber." The old witch promptly scrambled from the table. "My lords are not afraid," she said, leering up into my face. "Lead on." "Good, my lords." And she hobbled around to the back of the great death. "Here is the chamber. Let my lords light the lamp and enter." And she placed a gourd full of oil upon the floor and leaned herself against the side of the cave. I took out a match, of which we still had a few in a box, and lit the rush wick. Then looked for a doorway, but there was nothing before us except the solid rock. Gagool grinned and said, "There is a way, the way is there, brother. My lords, Do not jest with us," I answered sternly. "I jest not, my lords. See?" And she pointed to the rock. As she did so, on holding up the lamp, we perceived that a mass of stone was rising slowly from the floor and vanishing into the roof above, where doubtless there is a cavity prepared to receive it. The mass was of the width of a good-sized door, about 10 feet high and not less than 5 thick. It must have weighed at least 20 or 30 tons, and was clearly moved upon by some simple balance principle of counterweights, probably the same as that by which the opening and shutting of an ordinary modern window is arranged. How that principle was set in motion, of course, none of us saw. Gagool was careful to avoid this, but I have little doubt that there was some primitive lever which was moved ever so little by pressure at a secret spot, thereby throwing additional weight onto the hidden counterbalances and causing the monolith to be lifted from its bed. Very slowly and gently the great stone raised itself till at last it had vanished altogether, and the dark hole presented itself to us in the place which the door had filled. Our excitement was so intense as we saw the way to Solomon's treasure chamber thrown open at last that I, for one, began to tremble and shake. Would it prove a hoax, after all, I wondered, or was old de Silvestre right? Were there vast hoards of wealth hidden in that dark place, hoards which would make us the richest men in the whole world? We would know in a minute or two. "Enter, white men from the stars," said Gagool, advancing into the doorway. "But first, hear your servant Gagool the Old. The bright stones that ye see were dug out of the pit over which the silent ones are set, and stored here I know not by whom, for that was done longer ago than even I remember. Only once has this place been entered since the time that those who hid the stones departed in haste, leaving them behind. The report of the treasure went down indeed among the peoples who lived in the country from age to age, but none knew where the chamber was, nor the secret of the door. But it happened that a white man reached this country from over the mountains. Perchance he, too, came from the stars, and was well received by the king of that day. He it is who sits yonder," and she pointed to the 5th king at the table of the dead. "And it came to pass that he and a woman of the country, who was with him, journeyed to this place, and that by chance, or magic, the woman learned the secret of the door. 1,000 years might ye search, but ye would never find that secret. Then the white man entered with a woman, and found the treasure, and filled with stones the skin of a small goat, which the woman had with her to hold food. Also, as he was going from the chamber, he took up one more stone, a large one, and held it in his hand. Here she paused. Well, I asked, breathless with interest as we all were, what happened to De Silvestra? The old hag started at the mention of the name. How knowest thou the dead man's name? She asked sharply, and then, without waiting for an answer, went on. None can tell what happened, but it came about that the white man was frightened, for he flung down the goatskin with the stones and fled out with only the one stone in his hand, and that the king seized, and it was the stone which thou, Macumazahn, did take from Twala's brow. Have none entered here since? I asked, peering again down the dark passage. None, my lords. Only the secret of the door has been kept, and every king has opened it in his day, though he has not entered. There is a saying that those who enter there will die within a moon, even as the white man died in the cave upon the mountain where ye found him, Macumazahn, and therefore the kings do not enter. Mine are true words. Our eyes met as she said it, and I turned sick and cold. How did the old hag know all these things? Enter, my lords. If I speak truth, the goatskin with the stones will lie upon the floor, and if there is truth as to whether it is death to enter here, that ye will learn afterwards. And she hobbled through the doorway, bearing the light with her, but I confess that once more I hesitated about following. Oh, confound it all, said Good. Here goes. I am not going to be frightened by that old devil. And, followed by Foulata, who, however, evidently did not at all like the business, for she was shivering with fear, he plunged into the passage after Gagool, an example which we quickly followed. A few yards down the passage, in the narrow way hewn out of the living rock, Gagool had paused and was waiting for us. See, my lords, she said, holding the light before her, those who stored the treasure here fled in haste, and bethought them to guard against any who should find the secret of the door, but had not the time. And she pointed to large square blocks of stone, which, to the height of 2 courses, about 2 feet 3, had been placed across the passage with the object of walling it up. Along the side of the passage were similar blocks ready for use, and most curious of all, a heap of mortar and a couple of trowels with tools, so far as we had time to examine them, appeared to be of a similar shape and make to those used by workmen to this day. Here Foulata had been in a state of great fear and agitation throughout, said that she felt faint and could go no further, but would wait there. Accordingly, we set her down on the unfinished wall, placing the basket of provisions by her side, and left her to recover. Following the passage for about 15 paces further, we came suddenly to an elaborately painted wooden door. It was standing wide open. Whoever was last there either had not found the time to shut it, or had forgotten to do so. Across the threshold of this door lay a skin bag, fashioned from a goat skin, that appeared to be full of pebbles. "He, white men," sniggered Gagool, as the light from the lamp fell upon it. "What did I tell you? That the white man who came here fled in haste and dropped the woman's bag. Behold it. Look within also, and ye will find a water gourd amongst the stones." Good stooped down and lifted it. It was heavy and jingled. "By Jove, I believe it's full of diamonds," he said in an awed whisper, and indeed, the idea of a small goatskin full of diamonds is enough to awe anybody. "Go on," said Sir Henry impatiently. "Here, old lady, give me the lamp," and, taking it from Gagool's hand, he stepped through the doorway and held it high above his head. We pressed in after him, forgetful for the moment of the bag of diamonds, and found ourselves in King Solomon's treasure chamber. At first, all that the somewhat faint light of the lamp revealed was a lofty room, hewn out of the living rock, and apparently not more than 15 feet square. Next there came into sight, stored one on the other, to the arch of the roof, a splendid collection of elephant tusks. How many of them were there we did not know, for of course we could not see to what depth they went back. But there could not have been less than the ends of 400 or 500 tusks, of the first quality visible to our eyes. There alone was enough ivory before us to make a man wealthy for life. Perhaps, I thought, it was from this very store that Solomon drew the raw material for his great throne of ivory, of which there was not the like made in any kingdom. On the opposite side of the chamber were about a score of wooden boxes, something like Martini Henry ammunition boxes, only rather larger and painted red. "There are the diamonds," cried I. "Bring the light." Sir Henry did so, holding close to the top box, of which the lid, rendered rotten by time, even in that dry place, appeared to have been smashed in, probably by de Silvestre himself. Pushing my hand through the hole in the lid, I drew it out full, not of diamonds, but of gold pieces, of the shape that none of us had seen before, and with what looked like Hebrew characters stamped upon them. "Ah," I said, replacing the coin, "we shan't go back empty-handed anyhow. There must be a couple of thousand pieces in each box, and there are 18 boxes. I suppose this was the money to pay the workmen and the merchants." "Well," put in Good, "I think that is the lot. I don't see any diamonds, unless the old Portuguese put them all into his bag." "Let my lords look yonder, where it is darkest, if they would find the stones," said Gagool, interpreting our looks. "There, my lords, will find a nook, and 3 stone chests in the nook, 2 sealed and 1 open." Before translating this to Sir Henry, who carried the light, I could not resist asking how she knew these things, if no one had entered this place since the white man generations ago. "Ah, Macumazahn, the watcher of night," was the mocking answer. "Ye who dwell in the stars, ye do not know that some live long, and that some have eyes which can see through rock." "Look in that corner, Curtis," I said, indicating the spot Gagool pointed out. "Great heavens, you fellows!" he cried presently. "See here!" We hurried up to where he was standing in a nook shaped something like a small bow window. Against the wall of this recess were placed 3 stone chests, each about 2 feet square. 2 were fitted with stone lids. The lid of the third rested against the side of the chest, which was open. "See," he repeated hoarsely, holding the lamp over the open chest. We looked, and for a moment could make out nothing, on account of a silvery sheen which dazzled us. When our eyes grew used to it, we saw that the chest was 3 parts full of uncut diamonds, most of them of considerable size. Stooping, I picked up a handful. Yes, there was no doubt of it. They had the unmistakable soapy feel. I gasped as I dropped them. "We are the richest men in the whole world," I exclaimed. "Monte Cristo was a fool to us." "We shall flood the market with diamonds," said Good. "Got to get them there first," suggested Sir Henry. We stood still with pale faces and stared at each other, the lantern in the middle and the glimmering gems below, as though we were conspirators about to commit a crime, instead of being, as we thought, the most fortunate men on earth. cackled old Gagool, as she flitted about like a vampire bat behind us. There the bright stones ye love, white men, as many as ye will, take them, run them through your fingers, eat of them, drink of them, At that moment there was something so ridiculous to my mind in the idea of eating and drinking diamonds that I began to laugh outrageously, an example of which the others followed, without knowing why. There we stood and shrieked with laughter over the gems that were ours, which had been found for us thousands of years ago by the patient delvers in the great hole yonder, and stored for us by Solomon's long-dead overseer, whose name, perchance, was written in the characters stamped on the faded wax that yet adhered to the lids of the chests. Solomon never got them, nor David, nor de Silvestre, nor anybody else. We had got them. There before us were millions of pounds worth of diamonds and tens of thousands of pounds worth of gold and ivory, only waiting to be taken away. Suddenly the fit passed off, and we stopped laughing. "Open the other chests, white men," croaked Gagool. "There are surely more therein. Take your fill, white lords. Take your fill." Thus adjured, we set to work to pull up the stone lids on the other two. First, not without a feeling of sacrilege, breaking the seals that fastened them. Hurrah! They were full too. Full to the brim, at least the second one was. So wretched burglaress de Silvestre had been filling goatskins out of that. As for the third chest, it was only about a fourth full, but the stones were all picked ones, none less than 20 carats, and some of them as large as pigeon eggs. A good many of these bigger ones, however, we could see, by holding them up to the light, were a little yellow, off-colored, as they call it at Kimberley. Some, too, were black. What we did not note, however, was the look of fearful malevolence that old Gagool favored us with as she crept like a snake out of the treasure chamber and down the passage toward the door of solid rock. Hark! Cry upon cry comes ringing up the vaulted path. It is Foulata's voice. "Oh, Bhagwan, help, help, the stone falls!" "Leave go, girl, then! Help, help, she has stabbed me!" By now we were running down the passage, and this is what the light from the lamp showed us. The door of rock is closing down slowly. It is not 3 feet from the floor. Near it struggle Foulata and Gagool. The red blood of Foulata runs to her knee, but still the brave girl holds the old witch, who fights like a wild cat. Look, she is free. Foulata falls, and Gagool throws herself on the ground to twist like a snake beneath the lip of the closing stone. She is under. Ah, God! Too late! Too late! The stone nips her, and she yells in agony. Down, down it comes, all the 30 tons of it, slowly pressing her old body against the rock below. Shriek upon shriek such as we had never heard, and then a long, sickening crunch. And the door is shut, just as, rushing down the passage, we hurl ourselves against its mass. It was all done in 4 seconds. Then we turned to Foulata. The poor girl was stabbed in the body, and I saw that she could not live for long. "Ah, Bhagwan, I die," gasped the beautiful creature. "She crept out, Gagool. I did not see her. I was faint, and the door began to fall. Then she came back, and was looking up the path. I saw her come in, I saw her come in through the slowly falling door, and caught her, and held her, and she stabbed me, and I die, Bhagwan." Poor girl, Good cried in his distress. Then, as he could do nothing else, he fell to kissing her. "Bhagwan," she said after a pause, "is Macumazahn there? It grows so dark, I cannot see." "I am here, Foulata." Macumazahn, be my tongue for a moment, I pray thee, for Bhagwan cannot understand me, and before I go into the night, I would speak a word to him. Say on, Fulata, I will render it. Say to my lord Bhagwan that I love him, and that I am glad to die, because I know that he cannot cumber his life with such as I am, for the sun may not mate with the moon, nor the white with the black. Say that since I saw him, at times I have felt as though there were a bird in my bosom, which would one day fly hence and sing elsewhere. Even now, though I cannot lift my hand, and my brain goes cold, I do not feel as though my heart were dying. It is so full of love that it could live 10,000 years and yet be young. Say that if I live again, mayhap I shall see him in the stars, and that I will search them all, though perchance there I must still be black and he will still be white. Say, nay, Macumazahn, say no more, save that I love. Oh, hold me closer, Bhagwan. I cannot feel thine arms. Oh, oh. She is dead. She is dead, muttered Good presently, as he rose, the tears of grief running down his honest face. You need not let that trouble you, old fellow, said Sir Henry. Huh? Exclaimed Good. What do you mean? I mean that you will soon be in a position to join her men. Don't you see that we are buried alive? Until Sir Henry uttered these words, I do not think that the full horror of what had happened came home to us, preoccupied as we were with the sight of poor Fulata's end. And now we understood. The ponderous mass of rock had closed, probably forever, for the only brain which knew its secret was crushed to powder beneath its weight. This was a door that none could hope to force with anything short of dynamite in large quantities, and we were on its wrong side. For a few minutes we stood horrified there over the corpse of Fulata. All the manhood seemed to have gone out of us. The first shock of the knowledge of the slow and miserable end that awaited us, overpowering. We saw it all now. That fiend Gagool had planned this snare for us from the first. It must have been exactly the jest that her evil mind would have rejoiced in, this idea that the three white men, whom for some reason of her own she had always hated, slowly perishing of thirst and hunger in the company of the treasure that they had coveted. Now I saw the point of that sneer of hers about our eating and drinking the diamonds. Probably somebody had tried to serve the poor old Dom in the same way when he abandoned the skinful of jewels. And who was that somebody? This will never do, said Sir Henry hoarsely. The lamp will soon go out. Let us see if we can find the spring that works the rock. We sprang forward with desperate energy and, standing in a bloody ooze, began to feel up and down the door and the sides of the passage, but no knob or spring could we discover. Yeah. Depend on it, I said, it does not work from the inside. If it did, Gagool would not have risked trying to crawl underneath the stone. It was this knowledge that made her try to escape at all hazards, curse her. At any rate, answered Sir Henry with a hard little laugh, retribution was swift. Hers was almost as awful an end as ours is likely to be. We can do nothing with the door. Let us go back to the treasure room. We turned and went, and as we passed it, I perceived by the unfinished wall across the passage the basket of food which poor Fulata had carried. I took it up and brought it with me to the accursed treasure chamber that was to be our grave. Then we returned and reverently bore in Fulata's corpse, laying it by the door by the boxes of coin. Next, we seated ourselves, leaning our backs against the 3 stone chests which contained the priceless treasure. Let us divide the food, said Sir Henry, so as to make it last as long as possible. Accordingly, we did so. We reckoned, make 4 infinitesimally small meals for each of us, enough to support life for a couple of days. Besides the biltong or dried game flesh, there were 2 gourds of water, each of which now held not more than a quart. Now, said Sir Henry grimly, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. We each ate a small portion of the biltong and drank a sip of water. Needless to say, we had but little appetite, though we were sadly in need of food and felt better after swallowing it. Then we got up and made a systematic examination of the walls of our prison house in the faint hope of finding some means of exit. Sounding them and the floor carefully, there was none. It was not probable that there would be any to a treasure chamber. Our lamp began to burn dim. The fat was nearly exhausted. Quatermain, said Sir Henry, what is the time your watch goes? I drew it out and looked at it. It was 6 o'clock. We had entered the cave at 11. Infados will miss us, I suggested. If we do not return tonight, he will search for us in the morning, Curtis. He may search in vain. He does not know the secret of the door, nor even where it is. No living person knew it yesterday except Gagool. Today, no one knows it. Even if he found the door, he could not break it down. All the Kukwana army could not break through 5 feet of living rock. My friends, I see nothing for it but to bow ourselves to the will of the Almighty. The search for treasure has brought many to a bad end. We shall go to swell their number. The lamp grew dimmer still. Presently it flared up and showed the whole scene in strong relief, the great mass of white tusks, boxes of gold, the corpse of poor Fulata stretched before them, the goatskin full of treasure, the dim glimmer of the diamonds, and the wild, wan faces of us 3 white men seated there awaiting death by starvation. Then the flame sank and expired. And there we go. That is the conclusion of chapter 17, where they find King Solomon's treasure, finally. But how are they going to get out to spend it? How are they going to get out at all? Maybe this is the end for our heroes. We'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining me for today's reading. I hope you can join me again at Wednesday at 4 p.m., where we will read chapter 18 and continue on. We're almost done with the story, folks, so it's getting good. Thank you for joining me. We'll see you again. Bye.